All right, let's see. We'll go through a couple more of these and then jump back into the text. What text did you want to go to next?
Well, so back to Genesis 1 when we do that.
Okay,
You'll
all
see
right.
why.
Let's see. Hey guys, I was reading a you already addressed this. Matter of fact, this was from before you addressed it. But hey guys, I was reading a non-Trinitarian article stating that the us used in Genesis refers to God's majesty, not plurality. Want to recap your
Okay.
point there?
Yeah. So I didn't say as much as I could have, but and I'll have more to say too on a little bit different point. But number one, the very fact that God is speaking already demands a question, demands that we address ourselves to this issue. Why is the God of Scripture portrayed as a speaking being? Speech is a communicative act. When you get to verse 26, he speaks in the plural. Why is he speaking in the plural? And why? Think about this for a moment. Just think, analytically here for a moment. If God is absolutely one in the sense that he's one only and not a plurality in some sense, why would speaking in the plural be a way of indicating majesty? Wouldn't speaking exclusively in the singular be the way of indicating that? If the ultimate being is absolutely one, why do people not necessarily think in terms of plurality when they try and think of majesty and fullness? See, in the Christian doctrine of the Trinity, we have a footing for that, but I don't see how it makes sense outside of that context. When
And
when the
by the way,
Queen of England,
yeah, I just wanted to point out that this is a problem because you're addressing the issue from Genesis, but everyone should keep that in mind for Islam, as you were pointing out these plural pronouns in the Quran, where Allah is we this, we that, we this, we that, we this, we that. And we ask our Muslim
why
friends, what is that? Well, that's the plural of majesty. It's the plural of majesty. And as you just pointed out, what's being assumed there in that response? That it's somehow more majestic to be plural rather than some unitary being. It's more majestic to be plural. So the Muslims actually have to say that Allah is this, as you would say, a monad. He's this Unitarian deity who uses the plural of majesty, which isn't true. He's not actually plural.
He's like Muhammad Hijab trying to stick out his chest, right?
Yeah, he's bragging about being plural, calling himself plural because this is more majestic. So he's not the most majestic being imaginable. If it's understood by Allah from all eternity, if he's using these plural pronouns, he understands that it's actually greater and more majestic to be plural rather than this Unitarian deity. And yet Islam also constantly emphasizes that there's got to be one God. There's got to be one God. You can't have more than one God. Then, according to the Quran itself, the greatest deity would be one God who's multiple persons. Interesting. But yeah, go ahead. You were about to talk about the Queen.
Well, yeah, I was just going to say that some people don't know, like when you see the introduction of this, and there'd be different periods when it was introduced into different lands and languages, but when you see this sort of thing, one of the famous examples is the Queen of England when she quipped, "We are not amused." But in that original context, she's referring to herself and the ladies of the court. She's actually referring to a plurality along, a retinue, her retinue. And so it's actually historically problematic, at least if you're looking at English, but it would be problematic in other languages as well when you look to the origin of these things. But anyways, the real problem here, biblically or exegetically, textually, is it's one thing to say that there's a plural of majesty when it comes to nouns like Elohim or Adonai. But in Hebrew, verbs and participles and pronouns, there's no such thing as a plural of majesty in Hebrew. Okay, I've had several years of Hebrew. I have the literature. I could easily quote the scholars. I have scholars on the top of my head that I know have explicitly addressed this. Taylor Lewis, Emil Rodiger, Gesenius, the father of all Hebrew lexicons. There's no such thing as a plural of majesty when it comes to verbs, pronouns, participles in Hebrew. When you look at Genesis 1:26, when it says, "Let us make," here's the interesting thing. There's an interesting thing about it. The word for make is singular, but it has embedded the subject. So in Hebrew, you have the word, but the subject is often part of the word. So it's added to the word or the form of the word. And so it says make, but it's let us make. It's cohortative, so it's a form of mild exhortation. And that's so. But my point here is it's a verb. Let us make is a verb in Hebrew, and you don't have the plural of majesty being used with verbs in Hebrew. That's just not a phenomena of the language. But think about this. It's not the only, I only pointed to Genesis 1:26 because I wanted to show some contextual things. But if you go to Genesis 3:22, it says, behold, the man has now become like one of us. This construction is inconsistent with the plural of majesty. You have the Hebrew word memenu, one of us. It's partitive. It's saying one of this group, right? He's becoming like one of us. That's not the way you'd express a plural of majesty. But think again about another passage, Genesis 11:7. God says, come, let us go down and there confound their language. Contextually, this is a response to the tower builders. The tower builders say, in defiance of God's command to increase and multiply and fill the earth, they say, no, let's all stay here and build a tower to our name and fame. And so they say, let us build a tower. Let us build. In fact, it's the same Hebrew expression, let us make. They say, let us make a tower. And God says, let us go down and confound their language. So here's the question. Was it just one man that was trying to build a tower up to heaven in Shinar? Right? Because it says, let us, and that's just a plural of majesty. And God is responding to that. So contextually, why aren't the phrases being used in the same way? So the point is that sort of thing doesn't exist in Hebrew, not when it comes to verbs and participles. And there's a lot more I could say to that, but I think that's sufficient for now.
Right. So you want to go back to the